Good evening. Welcome to Building Trust for Yourself and Your Company. And this is a panel hosted by Edelson Edelson semester to come up with a plan that would engage an audience, and what they decided to do line was to honor Laura working on a special guest is a senior account executive at Quicken, and we also Oh, okay. And we also have Sid Nathan, Director of Internal Communications, the Office of the Suffolk County Executive. Also to my right, left, whatever, your left, my right, is Jake Mendlinger from the Zimmerman Edelson Agency in Great Neck. He's an account manager, and he also put this together for us. So we're talking about ethics tonight, and we've got a whole bunch of Twitter questions already, so we're going to work from there. But I just kind of wanted to frame this by starting off with what we talk about, what we mean by ethics in the first place. So I'm going to actually just throw it right over to our panelists. What do you guys see ethics as? When you hear the word ethics and you apply it to public relations, what is it to you? Jessica.
Sure. So I guess for me, I think it's staying objective in everything you do, and also being very transparent with your information, whether it's internal comms or external comms. Just the clear dissemination of information and transparency.
Okay, Sid, how would you define it?
Sure, and in government communications, it's similar, and that you need to be able to uphold the trust that your residents and voters placed in your administration. So the focus for us about ethics is about our residents. It's about those who gave us consent to govern. So it's about understanding our residents, what they would want out of their government, and upholding ethics based upon what they believe would be good government.
Okay, great. And Jake, to my right, your left.
Well, I guess I would echo exactly what Jess and what Sid had said. I think just one other thing to bring up would be, in our industry, it's kind of a cool saying, but it's not about the current story, it's about the next story. And I think that when it comes to working ethically, what it means is that you want to be able to build an authentic relationship with whoever you're speaking with so that they will trust you moving forward and be okay to go with you and use you as an expert or trust the story that you're pitching the next time.
Now, to further frame this, we know that the Public Relations Society of America, which is the leading trade organization for our profession, has a code of ethics, and they update it from time to time. But primarily, and kind of to capsulize it or give a very quick bulleted version of what it is, they're primarily trying to advance the free flow of accurate and truthful information, foster informed decision-making, protect confidentiality, avoid conflicts of interest, etc. And basically what they're telling us to do is, number one, be honest and accurate in everything we do. And that flows through all of the ethical questions that we're going to encounter in this discussion. So I guess what we really want to start with, which is kind of an interesting take on this, and I'd like to get your response, and then we'll get to our questions, is the word spin. We often get associated with the word spin, and I hear professionals in the industry who've been here for a long time use that word as if this is what we do. And before I give you my feeling about the word spin, I'd like to hear yours. So why don't you start, Jake, and then we're going to go right to Jessica and Sid again.
Yeah, I mean, it may sound like me putting spin on it myself, but our our whole goal as public relations professionals is to be able to tell a story that resonates with, the story that resonates with our clients. A greater narrative. So I wouldn't, when it comes to the word spin, that we're, public relations professionals take a story and then alter it so that, we're lying to the public, or we're lying to reporters, or lying to whatever. I think it's more about giving out more information and really just finding the pieces within a narrative that fit a client best, or that fit a company best.
Sid, what do you think of the word spin? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, spin in government communications, specifically to what I deal with, is about making sure in the variety of government programs, which are incredibly vast and staggering, and especially on a local level, from our veterans, from our seniors, from our police force, it's about making sure you find the incredible good things that government do and counter them with what you are mentioning. If there's a bad story out in the press, it's important to keep reminding residents about the good things that government is doing on a daily basis, which is, again, incredibly vast. And so spin in a government communication sense is about changing the dialogue towards an area that we're comfortable with. And I think it's not nefarious in any way. It's simply about agenda setting. And if there's a discussion that needs to be had, it's about us making sure that we facilitate that discussion. And so spin in government, in my opinion, is about making sure we're setting the right agenda and finding the right mode of discourse and topic to switch to.
Okay, so now, Jessica, I did not hear Sid or Jake say that spin is a dirty word.
It makes my blood
that it's a four-letter word, and it shouldn't even enter the lexicon. Say that again?
Sorry, I just said...
Jessica?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Spin is absolutely my least favorite word. It makes my skin crawl, blood boil, whatever analogy you have. I think, in my day-to-day life, at least, at Quicken, it's not spinning things. Spin to me sounds very, you're construing information, you're kind of twisting it around, maybe manipulating people's minds, and, it's not so much spin as finding, what your client actually has, expertise in, what they actually have, some intelligence in, what they're experts in, and then finding, how to give that to a reporter in a credible way that's timely and newsworthy. So, if it's the holiday season, everyone wants to talk about retail. If you have an expert that knows about retail, that's just providing a good source, in a timely manner. So I don't like to think about spin, and if anyone ever says that to me, I kind of stop them right in their tracks. It's more finding the connection between, what's newsworthy to a reporter and what your client actually has expertise in and can provide value in.
And as good PR professionals did, we all spun that question to dodge the actual question.
Wait a minute, nobody's spinning here. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I was at a conference, a PRSA conference a couple of months ago, and one of the CEOs of one of the major corporations, PR agencies in the world, said very simply, he told this audience of 1,100 students, we don't spin. And yet I have a question here from Sarah Lynn Cupp, who writes that the industry is trying to move away from the idea of spin, but does spin happen in the real world? So maybe, Jessica, you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I guess I can't speak for, everyone out there in PR, all over the world. So yeah, I'm sure spin happens, but I don't think it needs to happen. I think it's about, finding the connection. you need to work with your clients to find, what's relevant for them to say. If they have a thriving business, they must have something, some sort of expertise to share. And it's about finding that connection. I don't think that we need to spin things as much as make connections and find the right angles, and the right reporters to target too. You can't, blast everyone with your insight. It's about finding the right people and kind of making that connection. So maybe connection rather than spin.
Okay, we're now joined by Jenna Uliano. Hi, Jenna.
Hi. Sorry
Jenna,
about that. I was having some
right.
difficulties on my end.
Jenna's with Librify. She's the Director of Public Relations there. And we're into our conversation talking about ethics in public relations. But we started off with this topic of use of the word spin, and whether or not it is a real-world activity of public relations professionals, or whether it's really a dirty word that we should all be avoiding. So let's hear your spin on it.
Spin is a dirty word. I will certainly say that. I think we very much work in an industry where we are telling a story that comes from a perspective. I think that it has to be balanced. The PRSA Code of Ethics says, that we are basically sharing a story as honestly as possible on behalf of our clients or our companies. But I think what's interesting is that if you look over to the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, you'll see that on the same time they're looking to seek the truth. So they're coming from a place where they're looking for objectivity. And they know when a publicist reaches out to them, they certainly have an objective, and that's to get their client in the news. I don't think that's necessarily spinning the news, and I think spin comes with a really negative connotation, but I do think that publicists tend to have a certain, objective, and it's not necessarily to be, it's to get our clients out there and to share our message.
Well, Jake, would you say then that sometimes this idea of PR people spinning or trying to move a message a certain way is done or accomplished by omission, by the idea that, okay, we don't have to tell the whole story. We'll just leave certain things out that might be negative, and we'll tell a positive story. Isn't that also perhaps deceptive and unethical in a sense?
Yeah, I would say probably lying through omission is probably one of the more ethical things that you could do as a public relations professional, mostly because when the story does come out that that part of the pitch or that part of the story was left out, then the story gets focused on what that portion that you proactively omitted. So I would say on one end it's pretty unethical to leave out that part of the story, but on the other end it's probably a bad practice, mostly because the dirty laundry that you didn't want aired will end up being focused on.
Yeah, I mean, Sid, let me ask you, one of the guidelines within the PRSA's Code of Ethics is disclosure of information, and that all information must be disclosed. So leaving something out, I know that you work in government. The government's always accused of doing that, not telling us what's really going on. What do you say to that?
Yeah, again, I'd stick with my initial answer, and to me it's about agenda setting. The government has a very good idea of the services that we provide and what's the more effective services that we provide. And so if there's a discussion that is that needs to be focused on certain government services that we want to promote and let our residents be aware of, we'll switch that conversation to remind residents about our services. What often happens, and you can see in the past week, how quickly dialogues get created. Obviously, the national dialogue right now is about Ferguson and Staten Island, and it's dominating the coverage. On a local level, there are conversations that also dominate coverage. It could be on a local level, from a fence built in a local park to the way we take care of our veterans coming home. And so when you talk about omission, when you talk about messaging and spin, the local governments have a great idea about what services are most important to residents. And so we, as communication experts, continue to maintain focus on those basic services and continue to promote what we know are valuable services. So I don't call it spin, I call it agenda setting in a government sense.
If I could just jump in really quickly, I think we're getting on a down a spiral a bit of focusing on this idea of spin and how it pertains to the negative side of PR. A lot of the stories that are being put out are, positive stories. A lot of the stories when you're, a lot of public relations professionals aren't always dealing with crises. I think it's important to differentiate the terms spin and maybe finding the right fit for a client or finding the right fit for a narrative. If you're telling a story about a great thing that a school is doing, there really isn't a spin as much as you are making sure that that story is part of the greater narrative of the good things that are happening in education. So I think that it's important to note that as PR professionals, we're not tainting stories, we're making sure that stories are being told.
Right. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit away from this spin. Let's get away from spin. And I want to ask a couple of questions of our panelists that have been asked by people who are watching and who have an interest in what we're talking about. This one is from a student named Kat Kazava. What ethical issues should young professionals be prepared to face? So I guess really we can kind of put that in the context of, as a professional, you have faced ethical questions. What challenges have you faced? Maybe you can cite one specific story in your professional background so we can get some idea of the types of ethical situations we might face. So we'll go to Jenna and then we'll go to Sid. So Jessica, you're up.
Sure. So I think I'm fairly fortunate. I haven't been confronted with what I would consider kind of severe ethical dilemmas in my career so far. But I think one thing that's been really interesting for me is, I was a PR student not that long ago, and you hear about the big bad corporations, leading people on or not being transparent. And what I've learned through kind of some of the work that we've done over the years is that a lot of the times it's no one at the top trying to pull one over. I mean, sure, there's bad companies out there. Again, I haven't really come across a lot of them, in my direct client work. But it's not someone at the top, trying to pull one over and manipulate the situation. A lot of confusion comes from not accurately, sending out information in the right order. So, for example, when companies go through some sort of leadership transition, or maybe there's a merger or acquisition of some sort, I think one of the things that I've learned is that kind of the order of communication, who gets told what, when, and from who, and having that information be really clear and concise so that everyone, has the same message, not again, trying to pull one over on anyone, but just so that people are hearing the same information. As soon as you start hearing different information or partial information, people get nervous, people don't know what's going on, people get skeptical. So, you don't want your customers reading about some sort of change in the news, right? They should be contacted by, their customer representative, whoever their representative is at the company. Vice versa, you don't want employees finding out something about their own company from a customer who was told first. So, how do you go in and how do you organize all of that so that, everyone gets the information in the order that they should and clear and concise, and again, everything is communicated in a transparent manner. So, I know that's kind of a little bit different than what you asked, but I think that has been kind of a big eye-opener for me. There's a lot of reasons that, messages can get construed and there can be questions coming up, when there's a big change at a company.
Okay, so Jenna, have you had any ethical eye-openers in your PR career?
Yeah, I think, similar to Jessica, I think that I did hear a lot of these big, scary stories and was prepared to kind of enter the industry, with these crazy whirlwind spin stories, but I've been lucky and haven't had to face anything in a crazy, I want to hide under my desk kind of way. The nice part about being an entry level and coming in at the ground up is that you're always going to have supervisors and a team behind you. So there's always someone to ask a question to, and there's always someone who's going to be there for guidance. And that's something that's super important to remember. I think as a young publicist, I faced an ethical kind of dilemma that wasn't necessarily to a reporter or a consumer facing. It was actually a very personal moment. I had an opportunity for a client to be on an on-air segment, and we needed consumers to speak on behalf of the brand and advocate for the brand. And I needed my client to produce those advocates. Unfortunately, the client couldn't produce anyone at the time. And my client's suggestion was, instead of losing the opportunity, was to put me and my team members, my young team members, and our interns at the time, to put us on camera as the faux and fake consumers, and to kind of pose as a consumer and speak on behalf of the brand as if we weren't representatives. And I think that was the first time that I had to take a step back and tell my supervisors, I'm uncomfortable with this opportunity. I don't want to step in this way. If you want to handle it that way, that's your prerogative. That's your career on the line. I'm not going to go and tell this producer that I'm talking to, yeah, I've got a consumer, and pretend to be that consumer. And I thought, that was something that I wasn't prepared for when I first, started my career. I didn't think that my personal ethics would be challenged, but they were. And, I came out fine. I ended up telling my supervisors that I wasn't comfortable, and they were okay with that. And, we ended up going back to the drawing board and buying some more time, moving the opportunity to a few weeks later, and finding those advocates that we needed. But it was a challenge that I was not expecting to hear my clients say.
Okay, well, let me post this, Sid. I had an agency owner I worked for who would literally pay reporters to cover stories for his clients. And sometimes it came in the form of tickets to an event. Sometimes it was cash. Now, of course, there was a journalistic breach there, and also a public relations ethical breach. Have you ever encountered anything like that at all, Sid?
I haven't personally. I've certainly heard of stories, and that's not uncommon. Reporters will do whatever they can to find the story that includes some nefarious activities. I personally haven't encountered that. I'm not looking forward to the time that that may occur, but I personally have not. And I think it goes to show that the majority of reporters that I've certainly encountered are ethical. There are no doubt some who will do anything to find that story and do whatever it takes to get something juicy on the headlines. But I have to be honest and say no, I haven't yet encountered that.
Well, I guess that's good news, right?
Here's
a question.
If
Okay,
I can
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say I've actually encountered the opposite. Oftentimes when I'm out for coffee with a journalist, especially at top-tier publications, it doesn't matter if there's two clients, 2 PR people, and 1 journalist. There's a few in particular that say that they always need to pick up the bill, even if it's for a cup of coffee, because they're not comfortable, having us buy them a cup of coffee in exchange for that meeting. So I was actually shocked. I'm thinking, this is a $2 cup of coffee. There's 4 of us and 1 of you. This isn't a bribe or a gift of any kind, but a lot of them, I think, especially at the top tier publications, in my experience, are ultra sensitive to that sort of thing.
Yeah, similar. And if I could actually,
and that's very true.
If I could just quickly address the question about any ethical situations in government. For those watching who are interested in getting into government communication, obviously a large part of this is to find an elected official that you share values and beliefs with, and that allows you to message properly, allows you to have confidence in the person you work for. And so the ethical dilemma that young government communication experts will certainly find is that not all 100% of your values will line up with the elected official you work for. It's very, very rare, just because of the variety of beliefs and values that we all have. So you look for someone who has a majority, or as much similarities as you can to your vision, whether you're progressive, whether you're conservative, and you go with that, and you trust your elected official, and that's, to me, where a potential dilemma ethically may occur if your elected official doesn't share the same values you do. But you need to look towards what you believe in, and have an elected that shares the majority of beliefs that you do.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, but also on ethics. Let me start with you, Jake. Mm-hmm. Is it okay, and this is a question that was sent to us via Twitter, is it okay for a PR agency or a public relations professional to make up a quote for a client and throw it into a press release or throw it into any other publication online or offline, and say it is, in fact, a quote from the CEO or the president of the organization? Is it okay for you to ghostwrite a quote and say it belongs to somebody else?
Not before they approve it.
Okay.
However, I guess I can't speak for other public relations professionals, but it has been commonplace in my career where the PR professional would put together the quotes on behalf of whether it's a representative from a business or a public official, mostly because we hold the keys, I guess, to the messaging. We have a firm understanding of how that quote will bring the press release alive and really help the reporters get the information they need to develop a comprehensive story. I'd say going into, I guess, if we're going ethical experiences, it's a pretty interesting experience to write a quote on behalf of a client, because you need to know the information that you're putting out there as much as possible. So if I can give any advice, it would just be to always learn and make sure that you can count yourself as a bit of an expert, or at least be able to relay the messaging as best as possible.
But Jenna, isn't that a bit of a lie if you're actually attributing a quote to someone else that never said it or never wrote it? Isn't that a little bit of a lie?
I think, I've worked from the agency side, and now I'm on the in-house side of things, and I went to school for journalism, so make quotes was for me when I started in PR. I think it took a lot for me to get used to writing quotes, but at the end of the day, you are speaking on behalf of the brand. You are the spokesperson for the brand or the person, the company, and I think if you approve it by your client and they agree with that statement, I think it's not necessarily a lie. It's, you're putting the appropriate communications together that is going to be messaged out there. I think, one of the best tools to get used to doing that and making it feel as ethical as possible is to get on the phone with your client, talk it through with them. Not everything needs to be via email. You can pick up the phone. I know it's frightening to people. You can pick up the phone and talk to someone, and you just talk it through. You pretend that you're the journalist. You go through and you work on this messaging and the quote together with your client or your brand, and you create the messaging. As soon as they approve it, you've got your quote.
Okay, so Jessica, if that's the case, do you feel comfortable making up a quote? Isn't that what you're being paid for?
Yeah, I would say, oftentimes when, I, like everyone else, I write quotes for people on a daily basis. It's very commonplace. But I wouldn't say that we're making it up. Is it all of a sudden making it up if you're taking, a transcript of a speech that executive gave, 2 months before, taking out a section and giving that as the quote? Of course, after approval, I'm with Jake on that point, always getting it approved so that the executive, feels comfortable that that's something that he or she would say, it's in their tone of voice, they're comfortable with it. But, a lot of what we do is is repurposing information, for a different purpose, for a different audience. So when you're taking, brand messaging that's already being used, or maybe a speech that was already given, or things that executive has already believed in, worked on, potentially even already said, you're not sharing your childhood stories and passing them off as someone else's. It's kind of hopefully it's proven language and language that the person may already have used in the past.
Okay, Sid, I'm going to shift gears and ask you a new question.
Mm-hmm.
One of these this is a question that came from one of our students, Christine Ryan. How at all have public relations ethics and standards changed in light of the new media and in light of the internet and all of the possible breaches of ethics that come along with the ease of moving information and copying information and pasting information? Have ethics changed at all in terms of the challenges or in terms of the rules? What do you think?
There's no question it has. With social media, the distance and the speed to which information can get out is staggering. It's incredible. And so that means a pro and a con. That means in the con, there's a great amount of responsibility that all of us have when we are utilizing social media for our, whether it's your private company or for me, an elected official. There's a great responsibility that we have to make sure that we're being mindful about what we write. And certainly in the government sense, it's about encouraging thoughtful and respectful conversation. And so social media is, in the pro side, can be a dialogue starter in ways that no other media can even get close to. I mean, certainly, again, on the government side, our responsibility and our challenge with these new media tools is to utilize them mindfully and respectfully. And they could easily get out of hand. So I would say that the main change, to answer Christine's question, is how much responsibility and mindfulness we put into these new medias. And like I said, they can both be good and bad.
Okay, so let me go to Jessica. Jessica, have you seen changes in the industry create changes in ethical questions?
Yeah, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I definitely think social media has encouraged transparency a lot more. I mean, you can't get away with anything. Someone will call you out on social media very quickly about it, and as Sid was saying, the reach is so vast that things can, spiral out of control very quickly. So I mean, I think we're at the age of transparency right now in this industry. We know from, some of the recent news stories, there's there's cameras in elevators, people watch things, people, can call you out on inaccurate things with all the resources on the internet. So I actually think that all of those tools are kind of breeding more transparency, especially in kind of the B2B world, which is where most of my clients are, and that companies are actually being rewarded and prospering for having a very open, transparent, communications policy. Okay, I have a really good question for you, Jenna. And this came from another one of our students, and I've actually experienced this. A student once came to me and said she was doing work for a client that was a restaurant. The restaurant wanted to improve its comments, its list of comments, when you go to any one of the sites that provide that kind of thing. And the restaurateur wanted the agency to say, well, can you just make up some quotes so you're the first ones they see? And the intern was asked to do this. And she came to me and said, what should I do? I don't feel comfortable. What should an intern do when they're asked to do something that they may feel is unethical?
It's a hard place to be in because you are certainly building your own relationships with these people, and hopefully they'll be a reference for you, so I can certainly understand the catch-22 that you're in. At the end of the day, if you are uncomfortable, you need to talk to your supervisors and say that makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to do that. It's very, very commonplace to turn around and say, listen, I understand the topic at hand. I'm happy to brainstorm on other ways to make sure that people are reviewing the restaurant better on whatever website it may be, if it's Grubhub or Yelp or whatever. I am happy to take on, challenging like a social media challenge, creating a cute Pinterest page, coming up with an Instagram campaign. I'm happy to come up with something creative, but I'm not comfortable posing as a consumer and making up fake quotes on behalf of someone that doesn't exist. I think I would respect an intern that comes to me and says, I'm not comfortable doing that, more than an intern who just does it and then at the end of the day hates their internship and doesn't come to me for a reference.
Okay, great answer, great answer. I want to reintroduce our panelists for people who just joined us. You're looking right now at Jenna Uliano from Librify. She's Director of Public Relations. Jessica Nelson is the Senior Accountant Supervisor at Quitkin. Then we have Sid Nathan, who is Director of Internal Communications at the Office of the Suffolk County Executive. I'm Jeff Morisoff. I'm the Director of the Graduate Program in Public Relations at Hofstra University. And to your left, my right, is Jake Mendlinger, the Account Manager at Zimmerman Edelson, the sponsor of tonight's event. So here's a couple of more questions from our viewers tonight. A student asks, what can I do to stand out as a student or as an ethical person? What types of, how do I present myself to be ethical? Which is an important question, Jake.
I would say just ask a lot of questions. Probably the best way to get yourself into hot water is to fly by the seat of your pants or just go with it. Jenna's point, there are advocates out there. There are supervisors. There are people in place to help you get through the beginning stages and even the middle stages of your career. And those people are there to help. So ask as many questions as you can to kind of learn and build your own way to navigate ethics.
Sid, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we're all going to have different answers, which is why it's good. I guess my tactic has been to, in terms of standing out, is actually to listen first. It is to make sure that you're not jumping into situations that you're incapable of handling. And so I take the approach of waiting to pick your spots that you could excel. And I think what we have trouble in is that there's so much going on in the workplace. There's so many things that in order to really excel, you need to be able to pick your spots and put your whole effort into those areas. And it kind of mirrors on what Jake is saying, is by being a little bit more passive, asking questions, and listening until you find an area that you could stand out in. And it's so easy to get caught up and basically be everywhere at once. But I would take the approach of being patient, listening, and picking your spots.
Okay, sounds good. Jessica, what do you think? How does a student stand out as being ethical?
I think I'm right in the middle. So I think, ask a lot of questions in order to understand what you're really doing, make sure that you're comfortable with it, and then just remember your own morals and ethics, as a person outside of your job. Don't leave that at the door. Remember that, to bring that inside with you. And as long as you're understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it and the impact it's going to have, and you're, balancing that with your own moral compass that you have had your whole life and use all the time, you really shouldn't have that many problems.
And how about you, Jenna? What do you think?
I'm going to say that I think ethics is something that you have 24/7. It's something that's transparent about you. I can see it on your Twitter profile, your Instagram, your Facebook, your LinkedIn. We live in a digital age, so being ethical is I can pretty much tell who you are based on what you're putting out there for the universe to look at. But, you know, I think coming into an interview or coming, you know, into a team and boasting that you're ethical because you know, are part of PRSSA is great, but I want you to prove it to me. I want you to have, you know, some sort of story that you are okay with saying, you know what, I need to ask a question here. I need to step back and think about it, because if this is something that you believe that you are, if you are an ethical person, it's something that you can tell me, you can give me examples on your everyday life, not just in the PR world.
All right, I'm going to take another turn here and talk about a case study. You're working for a company. The company has perhaps done something wrong. Your boss, your CEO, says, don't talk to the media. The media is asking a lot of questions. The lawyers are saying, don't talk to the media. But you know that if you don't say something publicly, maybe somebody might get hurt out there, maybe a customer who's using a defective product or something like that. But your boss, who's paying you, says, don't talk to the media. The media is knocking at your door, emailing you, calling you, and wanting to know an answer. And you know that there may be some people involved that might be hurt by the situation. What do you do? What is the ethical way to approach something like this? I'm going to go reverse order now, and we'll start with Jenna.
I think it's okay to challenge your supervisor sometimes. I think to turn around and say, I understand we don't want to talk to anyone right now, and maybe, you know, granting an interview is not the best way to handle this, but I do think that there are people's lives at jeopardy, and we need to evaluate how much, you know, what that scale looks like. You know, I think this is very much on a case-by-case basis. You know, I've worked in-house here at Librify. You know, we don't really have crises like that, but in my agency work, I did represent, you know, a couple of transportation groups, and there definitely comes a time when you have to sit down and say, we need to have a statement, and we need to make a statement out there and get ahead of it, because it's going to blow up in our faces down the road if we don't say anything. And if people's lives are at risk, you for sure can say, we need to say something. You may get overruled as a junior person on the team, but, you know, you need to make those decisions.
Well, that's the thing. If you do get over, what do you do? I mean, the boss is saying you can't talk to anybody, and if you do, I'm going to fire you. What do you do?
It's a hard position to be in. I think it very much comes down to what exactly the situation is. You know, you can't speak on behalf of the client in that situation to a reporter. You know, but if there are lives at risk, then I don't know. That's a situation. I've never had to face that situation, and that's something that's really tough. I think I would certainly challenge the powers that be.
Jessica, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, chances are, I would hope that this would be the case at least, you know, chances are if you feel really strongly about something and, you know, people's lives are at risk, there's someone in your company that agrees with you. So, you know, say your supervisor is saying absolutely not or I'll fire you, you know, go to someone on their same level or go to someone above them. If it's the CEO, I'm sure the CEO has a number 2 or an executive team. You know, maybe your company is owned by another company and you can flag it to someone there. I think if there's lives at stake, you know, there's always someone who you can flag that to and get another opinion and get some help, especially in a junior level. You know, you need someone on your side and you need to do the right thing. And the other side of it is if lives are at stake, this is not a PR issue anymore. This could become a legal issue. There could be legal, you know, ramifications for keeping your mouth shut on something like that. So, yeah, sitting back is not the solution there.
But, you know, Sid, you're in a government office, you're surrounded by lawyers, and you must have situations where the lawyers are telling you, you can't say anything, we're going to get sued if you do. But meanwhile, you feel that and address something in a candid way. How do you balance that?
Yeah, that is extraordinarily difficult. That has happened on a number of occasions. And what I find, I do 2 things. One is I certainly make my voice heard, and let them know that I think there is a public responsibility to let our public know what exactly is happening. And oftentimes, you'd be surprised that that does win out. When you have that decision of whether or not to talk to the media, we often find that it is best to initiate a statement and let people know our mindset at that current time. So that's number one. I do find that speaking your mind and letting people know that this is a public responsibility, we do need to get information out there, is vitally important. Number two, in my situation and in a lot of situations in government communications, there is a reason why that elected official is there. They earned the trust and consent of the public, and they do have a vision, and they do have a good idea of what is appropriate public information. And so there is a level of trust that I place in my elected official. Certainly, I'm glad and I'm fortunate to work for the elected official I work in Suffolk County, Steve Bellone, who is incredibly honest, and that helps things. That certainly helps to work for an elected official that does believe in good government. And so, so I would say, number one, speak your mind, but number two, have trust in your elected official or your company boss.
All right, so Jake, Sid is saying he's very blessed to work for somebody who's incredibly honest. Is it possible to be too honest when you're in the public relations business?
Again, I may have a bit of a Pollyanna complex, and I know many people have told me that in the past, but you know, I don't think it is a bad thing. To be honest, I think it's a good thing to be brutally honest in the public relations world. Again, our job is to identify audiences and articulate value, and what we're doing is we are figuring out how to tell the best narrative. You know, so I think that when it comes to being open and honest, it's a key part of what we're doing, because we want to make sure that our clients or the people that we work with, and their audiences, have as much information as possible to make the right decisions and know what's going on.
Okay, so then if that's the case, if it's okay to be incredibly open and honest, what about this sin of omission? Don't PR people always leave certain things out when they're telling a story? And I know we've kind of addressed this earlier, but let's come back to it. There is that tendency, and I hear this from students all the time, oh, they just don't tell us the whole story. But really, do you always have to tell the whole story? Isn't it sometimes okay in a press release or even when talking to a reporter to leave something out?
Or telling the right story.
Or telling the right story. Okay, well, what do you think? Sid, what do you think? Leaving something out?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I had mentioned before, the benefit of being in government messaging is that you have a finger on the pulse of the government. You are intimately involved with a variety of government departments, whether it's your police or Veterans Affairs or social services or parks, and you're able to know, if you're a good government communications expert, you're able to be intimately knowledgeable about what's happening in each of those departments. And so when you're talking about omission, what I like to phrase it as is agenda setting. It is about making sure that our residents know what the services each of these departments are providing. And so does that mean to stay focused by leaving something out? It does, because we are more concerned about what the most important services are, and letting our residents know those services as opposed to you know, minor other details. So I would say that omission isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. It labels us to communicate to our residents more effectively, more focused, and so I think omission, in a sense, is not a bad thing. It could be a good thing.
Okay, good. New question. Competition with other agencies and competition for clients. One of the things that PRSA's Code of Ethics talks about is fair competition, not going after somebody else's client. and in an effort to get new business. Have you encountered that kind of an ethical dilemma where there might be an opportunity for your agency to get a new client, but that client belongs to somebody else? Jessica, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, sure. Companies, switch agencies all the time. I think, it's all about building a good relationship with the clients that you have, and then, sometimes there's a parting of ways. Sometimes it's mutually beneficial to both the agency and the company for a wide variety of reasons. And I think that if you have a good relationship with your client, it's not going to come as a shock that they're ready to move on. You might also be ready to move on for a variety of reasons, and then that. Same thing, if a client's unhappy with you for some reason, hopefully you've built up the trust and the respect over time that they would let you know that they're unhappy with you. They might give you notice. They may let you pitch again, re-pitch for the business, and let you know that other agencies are going to be invited, as well. So I guess in my experience, that's normally how it's come. If it's a new piece of business that we're going after, the company has told their current agency that they're unhappy, or maybe it was the agency that told the client that they were unhappy, or the relationship was no longer a fit. So, yeah, hopefully that's not happening behind people's backs in a sneaky manner. But it does happen, and I think another thing that happens a lot is companies will put out an RFP for a new agency simply to get ideas with no, intent on switching agencies. It's just to farm new ideas. So I think, that's extremely unethical from the company side. You're basically taking the time and resources from an agency without paying for it. So that's kind of the other side of it as well.
Okay, we're going to start heading towards wrapping up, but I would like to do that by kind of addressing the issue of the image of public relations people. That some people see us as spinmeisters, if we can come back to that word, as people who don't always tell the truth, as people who only accentuate the positive, as people who don't really give not only give the whole story, but often lie. That is a perception, just like used car salesmen. And perhaps it's an unfair perception, and perhaps we all know and feel that we're ethical people, and that perception, change that perception. Jenna, what do you think? How do you think we start?
I think we start by really developing relationships. I think something that we tend to do in today's generation and age is we have a lot of online relationships via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, our social channels. We're texting our friends, we're chatting with them, but we're not talking to them in person all the time, and we're not keeping that personal connection. I think reporters can certainly get jaded. They receive, especially the top tier, pitches on pitches on pitches each day, and it gets overwhelming. But I think if you take the time and effort to really get to know who you're talking to and hone that relationship, it changes the perception on publicists in general. You're coming in at an entry level. You have these great supervisors, you have great team members who probably have really cool relationships with fun reporters, photographers, bloggers, social media influencers, and to tag team on that and continue developing those relationships, because as an agency you are seen as a reliable agency for information because you're telling the truth, you come back with a quote or a statement, you've always got the news, you're always thinking of these reporters. That's kind of how you change things. On the in-house side of things, I make sure that I am taking the personal time and effort. Right now, I work at a startup, it's a very small team. I run all of our social media channels. So when bloggers are following us on Twitter or Pinterest, I am researching their information, getting their contact information, and making phone calls and saying, hey, I saw you're following us. I wanted to, just introduce myself. I'm here. I'm going to be sharing some really cool news. I'd love to keep you on my email list, and I'd love to talk about opportunities to work together in the future. I think that's something that really sets people apart. If you know who you're talking to, know your audience, that is something that is really spectacular, and knowing that you're reliable and ethical, really sets you apart from the masses that are spinmeisters.
Okay, so Sid, if the image of PR people is improving as the industry matures and the industry continues to grow, and its students become more educated and better equipped to handle these ethical questions, how do we continue to ride this momentum a little bit and improve the image of public relations as a profession?
Sure, and it actually kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the responsibility that we have as PR professionals. Especially in government, you have the responsibility of facilitating or creating a dialogue. And so our image is to continue that momentum of a good image would be to make sure that the dialogue that we create and put out there is respectful and is mindful. And whether we are talking about local issues or national issues, what we put on social media, what we put in a press release, needs to encourage dialogue, but in a respectful way. So as long as we do that, as long as we stand up for what we believe in and respectful values, the image of a PR person, I think you're right, is going to continue to improve. And so it's up to us. It's up to us to be, as the whole point of this discussion is to be ethical and is to be mindful. And which is why, by the way, this conversation, technical glitches aside, is excellent. And I do thank Zimmerman Ellison and all the interns for organizing this, because it's hard to start a dialogue on ethics, and I hope this is one of many, by the way, that we could do in the future.
We have one more live question. I'm going to start with Jessica on this one. Is there any way to tell a client that you're not happy with the way they are acting in terms of ethics? Is there a way to tell the client they're not acting ethically?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. If it's just a personal grudge you have against them, then that should probably be set aside. If it is a true breach in ethics in what they're doing, then yeah, of course, if you're senior enough and if you have the relationship with that client, you may be able to tell them directly. At a more junior level, you should definitely relay what you heard or oversaw or know about to a supervisor to deal with. But certainly, I mean, having a client isn't doing whatever they say. It's an open dialogue. They share information about the company and their ideas and opinions, and you share it back and provide your strategic counsel, and you go back and forth all the time. So yeah, I feel very comfortable, telling a lot of my clients, that I don't agree with a strategy or another, and most of the time, it's very easy to find a middle ground.
Okay, so Jake, do you agree? Do you often have to tell a client that you really don't agree with their approach to something, and not just the approach in terms of policy, but an approach in terms of their ethics?
Well, I mean, I think Jessica hit it on the head when it comes to breaching the topic of whether or not a client is acting ethical or letting them know that you don't agree with the ethics and the way that they're handling themselves. Maybe I would take it a step further. Maybe it isn't so much ethics as much as it is the public relations practice. A lot of times companies themselves, especially larger corporations, they get mixed up in the weeds of using their own marketing speak, or they will use their slogans in press releases, or their quotes will be riddled in slogans. And it's important as you all go up in your public relations careers to know that the public relations professional is a consultant. A public relations professional is there to help make things or conduct things the right way, and you have the ability to let them know maybe we should do things a different way so that it fits more closely with the way that's digestible for our audiences, or this relates better to the people we're trying to speak to.
Okay, so this comes to the time where we ask our panelists to give their sound, professional, and wise advice to our audience who are primarily students who are looking for their careers and their place in the public relations practice. So I'm going to start with Jenna. Jenna, in 60 seconds or less, how about some advice on ethics for our students who are about to start looking for a job?
Just be ethical on your day-to-day. And if you have issues with drafting quotes on behalf of people, or writing something with your client in mind first, practice. Join a club, join the school newspaper, learn how to interview people, learn how to get those quotes and talk to people, and become an expert in what you're going to be talking about.
Okay, Jessica, your advice?
Sure, it's hard for me to pick one thing, because I feel like I could talk about this for a whole hour, but I'll say the one thing, don't be afraid to ask people. Ask people for an hour of their time to bounce off ideas off of them. Ask for informational interviews to learn about a new industry with no agenda, just questions and a desire to learn. Follow up with people after a session like this, or a guest lecturer at that comes into your class. Shoot them an email, connect with them on LinkedIn. It seems so basic, but you'd be shocked at how few people do that, and how willing people are to have you into the office, to show you around, to introduce you to people, to give you their advice, to look over your resume, all of that stuff. So nobody's going to offer it to you. You have to speak up, and you have to reach out, and you have to kind of take the first step. But people are generally really nice and want to help you.
Okay, great. Sid, your advice, last words of wisdom for tonight?
Sure. I mean, especially, look, in government and politics, the word ethics gets thrown around a lot. And so if someone is interested in getting in that field, it's about matching up with someone who you believe in. And again, I'm fortunate to be working for someone I believe in, but for those who are looking around, maybe it's a local council person, maybe it's a congressman, it needs to be someone that you can relate your values with. And I think that in the politics and government sense is the trickiest part of it. So my big advice is find someone you believe in and stand up for your own values, but make sure that whoever you're working for professes the majority of the values that you believe in as well.
Great. Okay, Jake, and your 60 seconds of wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody did a great job of giving some advice. I think I'm going to take some of the advice that the three of you guys gave. But I think just one thing would be, know that you are your own client. Make sure to handle yourself ethically. Make sure you're doing things the right way, so that when it is your turn, or when it is your time to begin and your journey as a public relations professional, you kind of have an understanding of what that will entail.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jake. And thank you to Jenna Uliano, the Director of Public Relations for Librify. Thanks to Jessica Nelson, the Senior Account Supervisor at Quicken. And thanks to Sid Nathan, who is the Director of Internal Communications in the Office of the Suffolk County Executive. Jake Mendliger is from Zimmerman Edelson, and really kind of spearheaded this whole thing, along with our interns, Gabrielle D'Agostino, Megan Connor, Lauren Curlett, Alexis Giannissi, and Olga Varnaskaya. And on behalf of the Zimmerman Edelson Corporation, or Incorporated, I'm Jeff Morisoff from Hofstra University. We thank you for joining us for our panel discussion on building trust for yourself and your company and our public relations ethics, and we wish you a very good night.
Thanks.
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 Bye-bye.